Upon entering the washroom and suddenly discovering my stepson, I made a decision that rendered the event one of the most thrilling moments of my life. The occurrences started on a typical Tuesday. The house was serene, as it often was on nights when my stepson Liam returned home little earlier than usual. His car parked neatly. Liam had surpassed boyhood in the driveway. At 21, he displayed a restrained confidence, albeit a trace of unease pervaded his conversations. Upon setting my luggage down and removing my heels, I detected the subtle sound of flowing water from above. My intuition suggested that Liam was showering. While it was not unusual, there was a certain ambience. I endeavored to alleviate the lingering discomfort as I consumed a quick drink of water. The evening was expected to be uneventful, comprising simply me, Liam, and the serene ambience of our home, as my partner Patrick, Liam's father, was away on a business trip and would not return until the next morning. Upon exiting the house, it seemed more desolate than usual. Upon mounting the stairs, I saw the bathroom door was slightly open, and the sound of running water grew louder. My curiosity prompted me to take an apparently harmless glance. Unfortunately, what I witnessed left me paralyzed. I noticed Liam at the sink through the door's opening, his back to me, shirtless, with slightly slumped shoulders. His hands moved purposefully, maybe focused on a thing. However, I could not identify what it was. His trousers sat low on his hips, conveying an uncommon impression of nonchalance for Liam, who was typically meticulous and reserved. Concerning privacy, an open door was almost unparalleled. I hesitated momentarily. Should I knock, call out, or close the door? I let him to stay undisturbed until I reached my judgment. The door creaked as I shifted my weight, causing Liam to turn in surprise. His eyes widened in dread. "I was not aware you were at home," he murmured, quickly trying to obtain a towel to cover his prior actions. His voice quivered, and his demeanor was markedly unlike to that of the composed young man. I had adapted to it. "I did not want to intrude," I remarked impulsively, averting my eyes as my cheeks reddened with embarrassment. I perceived the sound of water and inferred that something was awry, as his face turned a profound scarlet as he stared at the towel grasped firmly in his hand. "Negative. It is trivial." The tremor in his voice disclosed his genuine feelings. There was an anomaly. I perceived it in his avoidance of eye contact and the way his shoulders drooped, as if weighed down by an invisible burden. I halted, my hand still on the door's edge. A part of me wants to honor his seclusion, but a more assertive aspect compels me to ask. I softly greeted Liam upon entering the restroom, ensuring the door was securely closed behind me. "Please notify me if there is a problem. I tell you that I will abstain from judgment." He grasped the towel firmly, then loosened his grip little. For a short duration, I thought he would keep silent. Nevertheless, he breathed unevenly and sat on the edge of the bathtub. He admitted, slightly abashed, his voice barely audible, as I leaned against the counter, adopting a relaxed posture to reassure him. I respectfully indicated that you are not obligated to divulge anything that causes discomfort. Yet periodic discussion may prove advantageous. He nodded intentionally, his eyes fixed on the ground. I have been contending with a dilemma and was unsure whom to counsel. His vulnerability astonished me. Liam had constantly demonstrated autonomy and self-sufficiency, making his choice to confide in me, someone with whom he rarely shared personal matters, significant. "What is it?" I asked. He maintained a neutral and encouraging tone, pausing to massage the nape of his neck. "It concerns my body. Some anomaly has manifested, and I am confused if it necessitates worry or if I am only overanalyzing." His comments surfaced abruptly, as though he had been concealing them for a prolonged duration. I felt an overwhelming sense of compassion for him. "It probably took some courage to articulate even that extent," I remarked, choosing my words carefully. "You are not alone. Everyone has similar questions at some point. And it is admirable that you are mindful of your health. Do you require assistance in addressing this issue?" He gazed at me, his countenance a mixture of relief and ambiguity. "I would not object." "Surely not," I responded, with a reassuring smile. "We can resolve this together." As our dialogue progressed, the initial uneasiness started to diminish. Liam expressed his fears in disjointed phrases, his words punctuated by worried glances to the ground. I focused my concentration, while Liam articulated his thoughts. I offered calm comfort and pragmatic counsel. The seriousness of his anxieties became increasingly apparent. His voice trembled with each word, revealing the duration of his repressed thoughts. The bathtub, warm and redolent with the aroma of soap, seemed an improbable setting for such a private conversation, but, at that time, it was the one location of importance. "I am uncertain if it is typical," Liam commented, adjusting the towel's edge. "There is no manual for this issue." "Is there?" "Father is not the one I would choose to counsel," his remarks persisted, the underlying truth inside them penetrating the discomfort. Liam and Patrick sustained a favorable relationship. Nonetheless, an underlying disparity remained. Neither party seemed to understand how to overcome the barrier. I understand, I remarked softly. Leaning on the sink may complicate discussions on some topics, even with close acquaintances. Nonetheless, confronting these concerns is praiseworthy. It is more desirable than repressing them within. He consented while his expression remained concealed. I just do not want to seem odd or obtrusive, I intervened gently. Everyone experiences similar emotions at some point. Be assured, you are not unusual. You demonstrate bravery by confronting the issue. His lips formed a slight grin, and for a while, I thought the tension in his shoulders may ease, but it was clear that he still had further thoughts. He said, his voice nearly imperceptible, that he feels estranged from his identity and misplaced, articulating ambiguity over his own problems. The sadness of his remarks affected me profoundly. This issue surpassed physically. It was a significant concern that had been plaguing him for a prolonged duration. After a brief reflection, I told Liam that there was nothing wrong with him. He was only processing his ideas. Which is very appropriate, as no one had all the answers. Especially at his age. He gazed at me, his eyes searching mine for validation. I sincerely hold that belief. I assured him of my assistance. That irrespective of the circumstances, we would address this together. For the first time, Liam's posture softened somewhat. He leaned against the wall, still clutching the towel, and sighed slowly. I have not previously addressed this topic. I questioned whether anybody would understand. At times, we neglect to recognize the ability of others. I commented with a little smile. One could be surprised by their understanding if given the chance. Nonetheless, it is quite reasonable to be selective about whom you trust, as not everyone need access to all facts. He nodded again, this time with increased confidence. Confirming that it was logical, the conversation then progressed. I transitioned from addressing his initial concerns to discussing more practical matters, offering advice grounded in my experiences and insights while keeping the tone light, conscious of preventing any hint of judgment or unease in our dialogue. I noted a change in Liam. His usual defensiveness seemed to fade, replaced with a tentative openness. It seemed that he was now allowing himself to be viewed not just by me but also by himself. During the conversation, I noted his arousal intensifying as he looked at me, which was anticipated considering my gender, yet I must assert that it did not captivate me owing to its substantial size. I rendered aid. I cleaned it and intermittently grasped it out of need, yet at those occasions, I chose to maneuver it, shifting it vertically. I felt ambivalent about my views. However, I acknowledged that this would not be my last instance of possessing it. After what appeared to be hours, the talk gradually diminished, and the prior tension in the restroom evaporated, replaced by serenity. Liam regarded me, his countenance a mixture of appreciation and relief. He expressed his gratitude discreetly. I never expected to engage in this discussion with anyone. I smiled and reached out to gently caress his shoulder. I am content. You did. And remember that you may always consult me if you need to discuss anything. Irrespective of the situation, I am here for you. He nodded, his eyes glistening with uncried tears. Upon rising to leave the bathroom, I encountered a strange blend of emotions. I felt relief that Liam had confided in me and that I had been able to assist him. Yet I could not shake the belief that this was merely the beginning. That his struggles extended beyond what he had disclosed. The evening continued peacefully thereafter. Liam retreated to his room, leaving me solitary in the living room, clutching a cup of tea as I contemplated our conversation. It was atypical. Liam's choice to confide in me was significant, yet it engendered a lingering apprehension. What if he faced more challenges of which I was oblivious? And what if I could not provide sufficient support? Ready to aid him, questions flooded my mind as the hours passed. Eventually, I forced myself to go to bed, but sleep evaded me. I remained awake, staring at the ceiling, the day's burdens pressing down on me. Notwithstanding the presence of uncertainty, one certainty persisted. I would exert every effort to assist Liam, oblivious to the fact that the occurrences of that evening were only the beginning. In the next days, a strange, almost tangible tension permeated the environment. Although externally, everything seemed normal, Liam persisted in his routine, working part-time at a local cafe, isolating himself in his room, and avoiding the more serious topics we had previously addressed. Nonetheless, I could not shake the feeling that something had shifted. A tangible yet ineffable connection existed between us. I tried to simulate normalcy after Liam's revelation and sought to provide him confidence. I was certain that all would be okay. Nonetheless, there were nuanced signs that captured my attention. I noticed him retreating within, his eyes avoiding mine when we crossed paths in the corridor, and the stiffness in his shoulders whenever I initiated small chat. It appeared that he was withdrawing into an impenetrable domain, one he had not allowed me to penetrate. During supper one evening, as we sat in quiet, I observed him stealing glances at me from the periphery of his vision. Our eyes briefly connected before he swiftly diverted his look, his cheeks flushing. This short interaction left me with an uneasy feeling. as though an unexpressed tension persisted between us. I attempted to disregard it, but it became difficult. Our connection seemed to be transitioning into an unclear condition. Despite Patrick's usual cheerful disposition upon getting home that evening and our compliance with our customary routine, Liam perceived a latent unease. He exhibited an unusual reticence, and I noted his gaze often shifting toward me during the evening, only to divert upon my awareness. This behavior was understated yet apparent the next day. Following Patrick's departure for work, I was alone in the house with Liam. As I prepared lunch in the kitchen, I discerned the subtle sound of footsteps behind me. I observed Liam standing at the doorway, his mood ambiguous. I greeted him, striving to retain a jovial demeanor. "Is anything acceptable?" He glanced at me briefly, then nodded, confirming, "Yes, I simply wanted to talk," with a subtle sign of apprehension. Intuitively understood. This was the moment that had hovered in the atmosphere between us for days. I set the knife down. I had been employing it and turned to face him entirely. "What is your opinion, Liam?" I asked. My voice stayed steady despite the tense fluttering in my breast. He hesitated, shifting from one foot to the other as if deliberating whether to express his ideas. "I have been encountering an unusual sensation recently." He started his sentence slowly and methodically, as if meticulously choosing his words. "I cannot express it well, but this vague anxiety has been bugging me." I concentrated only on him, noting how his eyes sank to the ground, avoiding my stare. "It is acknowledged that you are capable of communicating with me. Is that correct?" I calmly replied. "If something is concerning you, I am here to assist." He did not reply promptly. He sighed deeply, as if bracing himself for the forthcoming challenges. He ultimately stated, "I am uncertain about my present condition," his voice heavy with uncertainty. I felt profound sympathy for him upon recognizing the vulnerability in his eyes. The ambiguity that had previously obscured his countenance during our initial chat persisted. The Liam before me was much altered from the one I had previously known. He carried an unseen burden, a load he seemed unsure how to handle. "It is acceptable," I stated softly, coming towards him and resting a hand on his shoulder. "You do not need to possess all the answers at once. Occasionally, we may lack clarity, yet we can traverse this together." He locked eyes with me, his glance revealing a mixture of appreciation and an elusive sentiment. His gaze exhibited a stark honesty, unveiling the true essence of Liam for the first time. He said, in a barely audible tone, that he felt lost and unclear about his identity and position in the world. I acknowledge that I am no longer a child. Nonetheless, at times I feel ambivalent about the maturity process, as if I am trapped in the authenticity of his disclosure. Astonished me beyond expectation. Liam was grappling with profound emotional challenges, transcending mere bodily alterations or humiliation. Numerous people express similar emotion. "Liam," I observed softly, holding his shoulder, "comprehending everything at once is naturally difficult. But you are not alone in this effort. Both your father and I are here to assist you." He met my gaze, and his expression softened, albeit a hint of hesitation lingered in his eyes. "I just dislike imposing on others. Your presence is not a hindrance. Whatever my difficulties," I assured him, my tone unwavering, "we shall perpetually constitute a family. And during arduous times, we shall remain cohesive." He provided a purposeful nod. The corners of his lips elevated little, suggesting that my remarks had afforded him a degree of solace. Throughout the day, Liam seemed more relaxed. He stayed in the kitchen, while helping me with the dishes and participating in casual conversation. His usual reserve was replaced with a measured openness. It was the first instance in days that he resembled the Liam I had previously known, somewhat less guarded and more at ease. Nonetheless, despite his smiles and joy, I could not eliminate the impression that he had unexpressed burdens. His eyes were not fully opened, and I realized that this conversation, albeit meaningful, was only the beginning. Later that evening, as I lay in bed, I reflected on all that had occurred. Subsequent to that episode, Liam confided in me more than he had in years. Nonetheless, I recognized that some facets of his character remained concealed, characteristics he was not ready to expose. Nevertheless, one truth was clear. I was determined to support him, irrespective of the time or difficulties entailed in the undertaking. This transcended mere physical health or intrusive questions. The emphasis was on aiding Liam in identifying his life trajectory, offering support as he navigated the various hurdles of growth. As time advanced, I saw that whatever problems awaited us, we would face them collectively, signifying only the start of our adventure. The days subsequent to our discussion revealed a delicate balance. Liam had grown more forthright, and I sensed a feeling of relief in him, as though he had lost a weight. Nonetheless, despite his improved mood, an underlying hesitancy remained, an unexpressed tension that stayed between us, resembling a secret poised for disclosure. Throughout the week, I reflected on the results of our conversations and questioned whether Liam truly believed he could confide in me completely. He had entrusted me with critical elements of his life, establishing in me a deep sense of obligation to assist him while he confronted his personal conflicts. However, an indefinable quality persisted that I could not discern, becoming tangible whenever I looked into his eyes. There were moments when it seemed he was on the verge of a significant transformation, one that would change everything. One evening after dinner, Liam seemed unusually distant. He hardly participated in conversation, offering curt and indifferent responses to my questions. I observed him frequently, although he persistently averted his look as if engrossed in his own thoughts after dinner. While Patrick retreated to the living room to watch television, I stood in the kitchen, absorbed in the dishes, yet I could not shake the feeling that something was off. Liam re-emerged at the doorway, his expression enigmatic. His eyes, often marked by doubt, were now shrouded in an unfathomable darkness. My heart raced as I turned to face him, wiping my hands on a dish towel. I questioned softly, striving to preserve a neutral tone, but the concern in my voice was hard to mask. "Is everything satisfactory?" He nodded but did not enter the room. A longer silence followed as we stayed there, and I felt the weight of his emotions lingering between us. Liam expressed in a muted tone that he had been reflecting on their conversation. "He seemed somewhat hesitant about your assertion of being there for me." He paused, then moved a step closer, his demeanor tense. "I need to address another issue with you, one that I have been unable to understand." My pulse quickened at his words as I approached, my heart burdened with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. "Certainly, Liam, we will address the matter at hand." He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I had come to associate with moments of vulnerability, implying that one should not carry the load alone. "It is challenging for me to express this," he stated, his voice trembling slightly, "but I must communicate something to you." I had been distressed for a period, unsure of whom to seek counsel from. I stood there, my breath caught in my throat, fully cognizant of the significant gravity of the situation. I abstained from applying pressure on him, although I wished to provide my support. Hence, I only nodded in encouragement. He paused, briefly averting his glance to the floor before fixing it onto me. "I am unsure how to express this, but I have been undergoing a significant transformation over the unexpectedly heavy remarks that remained in the air, which took me by surprise." I blinked, unsure whether I had understood him correctly. "Distinct," I articulated, my voice barely above a whisper, my heart racing. "What is your meaning, Liam?" He swallowed noisily, his jaw tightened as he fought to preserve his composure. He articulated his perplexity, indicating that he had been questioning several facets of his identity. "I believe I have acquired romantic feelings for you." I hesitated to express my views, unsure whether my sentiments were just my own. Nevertheless, following further contemplation, they progressively appeared authentic. His confession incapacitated me. I stared at him, unsure of how to respond. His words were unclear as I attempted to grasp their significance. My heart raced, and my mind was in overdrive, struggling to understand what I was hearing. This was not what I had expected. It was not what I had planned for when I pledged my support. As I looked into his eyes, I discerned the raw truth and desperation. Liam was not soliciting anything. He was only endeavoring to understand his emotions. At that point, I acknowledged his want for an impartial ear. Nevertheless, I cannot disregard the satisfaction I had when recalling the proportions of his physique in the restroom. A notion that often exhilarated me, inhaled gradually and consistently, striving to alleviate the inner turmoil. I said softly, "Liam," my voice trembling slightly, "I appreciate your company, but I need to communicate something to you." I paused in my search for the correct word. "You are not defective, you are only encountering a confusing circumstance. And it is okay to feel bewildered occasionally. It is essential for you to understand that the topic we are addressing is complex. This situation is complex." He nodded, his eyes mirroring a combination of apprehension and relief. I was hesitant regarding whom to confide in, and I chose not to do so. "Can no longer endure this." His voice wavered little, exposing his vulnerability. This was not driven by desire. It sprang from confusion in the pursuit of refuge inside an unexpectedly overpowering setting. I approached Liam and gently touched his shoulder. I declared, my tone steadfast yet infused with empathy. "I will always be. I am prepared to assist you. But this situation requires careful deliberation. Your emotions are legitimate, nonetheless. We must use prudence. I am incapable of doing so. I am unable to fulfill your request as you expect, and I prefer to refrain from leading you along a potentially harmful path for both parties." He looked at me, his lips trembling as if expecting my retreat or a demand for his exit. Still, I remained still, striving to offer comfort in the only way I knew. I assured him of my unwavering support as a confidant, but we must carefully consider the ramifications of our circumstances without urgency. An internal metamorphosis transpired inside me. I pondered why I did not comply with his instruction. It was equally thrilling for me. So why not? Following a little pause, I wrapped my hands around his neck and kissed him. He granted a kiss. She reciprocated my kiss, and it was extended. It was as if an explosion of yearning had occurred within both him and myself. I expressed my apologies for the mistake. Liam, after a little pause, it is trivial, so, he replied without delay. I stopped kissing him and descended. I achieved what I had longed for since my time in the restroom. While I was distracted and looked up, I noticed that he was gaining enjoyment from this. This is exceptional, extraordinary, he whispered. After around 10 minutes, I noted that he was approaching his conclusion, which compelled me to hasten my speed. Thereafter, a prolonged stillness occurred, in which neither of us spoke a word, the weight of his statements being palpable. Liam gradually inhaled deeply, his shoulders relaxing as though he had been holding his breath for an extended period. He expressed his gratitude in a soft voice. To do this, I require that. It is my honor, I expressed gently, my heart weighed down by ambivalent emotions, and recall that it is unnecessary to address all matters at once. You are not alone in this issue. Following a brief pause, Liam acquiesced and retreated. A faint smile appeared on his lips as he gently remarked, I will ascend the stairs. Thank you once again. I expect enhanced sleep this evening. Good night, Liam, I said, watching him up the stairs. A minor weight lifted from his shoulders, nevertheless. As I stood alone in the kitchen, I could not shake the tangible feeling of change that permeated the air. I acknowledged this moment as pivotal. It was a crucial juncture in our relationship, one that might lead to either reconciliation or a more complex predicament. The ensuing days transpired in an unusual stillness. A noticeable, yet little, alteration transpired in the domestic atmosphere. Liam had become increasingly reclusive again, albeit not in the same way as before. It was neither a tangible chill nor a distinctly recognizable distance. It seemed he was still processing what we possess, his attempts to understand his feelings and determine a course of action. There were occasions when he seemed bewildered, engrossed in thought. He stared blankly, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing patterns on his trousers or coffee cup. I sought to avoid imposing undue pressure on him, recognizing that this was an issue he needed to address autonomously and at his own pace. Despite the difficulties involved, while I sought to respect his need for solitude, I also desired to provide my support. To prevent his seclusion, I could not ignore the evident load he carried. His usually lively eyes now had a faraway, lifeless aspect. One afternoon, sitting in the living room, I noticed Liam walking down the hallway. His shoulders were down, his head lowered, and his stride exhibited a slight burden. Nonetheless, it imparted considerable significance. I understood that he was distressed by matters beyond our prior conversations. I stood up and walked towards him, finding him at the foot of the stairs. He looked up as I approached, surprised by my sudden appearance. Liam, I inquired softly, might we engage in a brief conversation? He paused, perhaps inclined to withdraw to his room, yet eventually nodded slowly, as if conceding to an intrinsic want to be acknowledged. We entered the living room, where he positioned himself on the couch, viewing me with a mixture of apprehension and eagerness. It has been a while since our previous discussion, I began, seating myself nearby yet preserving a respectful distance. I observe that something continues to occupy your thoughts. If you want not to engage in discussion, that is okay, but I wish to convey that I am here to provide my support. At first, he was silent, staring forward with a clenched jaw. After what felt like an eternity, he released a sigh, heavily turned to face me. He began, his voice muted and hesitant. I have been reflecting on your claim about our familial connection, and I am beginning to doubt whether I am excessively scrutinizing the matter. I am unsure how to stop feeling trapped within my own thoughts, as if my emotions are unwarranted. I perceived the irritation in his speech and noted it in his eyes. Liam continuously attempted to repress his emotions. Even when they were intense, it seems he thought that by not addressing them, they may dissipate. Nonetheless, I was cognizant of the fact. Emotions do not dissipate, they endure, sometimes escalating until they become inescapable. You do not need to have all the answers at this time, I remarked gently. Your feelings are legitimate, and it is okay to feel bewilderment and disorientation. Does not characterize you as a wicked individual, it only denotes your humanity. All individuals encounter such circumstances. He regarded me with an equivocal face. Albeit he nodded slowly, he said gently that he did not want to generate discomfort between them, as if the very statement caused him to feel apprehensive. I seek to refrain from transgressing limits or becoming excessive. Although I am unclear to whom else I may confide, my heart yearns for him. I noted his significant difficulty in understanding himself and in reconciling the various feelings he experienced. At that point, I discerned an essential truth. He desired not explanations from me, but rather affirmation of the validity of his emotions. It is okay for him to have confusion. Liam, I asserted, my tone resolute, you are not violating any limits. You are not excessive. You are only an individual striving to understand your situation, which is very natural. Your emotions do not make you immoral or incorrect, they only indicate your humanity. He swallowed noisily and then stared at his hands, clearly lost in thought. He was still processing all I had spoken, striving to align it with his own internal turmoil. At times, I reflect, I am uncertain whether I will ever stop feeling this way, he confessed, his voice barely audible, or if I will ever achieve certainty regarding my identity. I leaned in slightly, assuring he recognized my full presence. Liam, it is okay to possess incomplete information. You are engaged in a process that is not instantaneous, yet you will ultimately get at your objective, and you need not traverse it alone for a lengthy duration. We sat in silence, with only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the subtle rustle of the wind outside breaking the stillness. The quiet possessed a cathartic and restorative effect. Liam did not necessitate my assistance in addressing his problems, he only required my presence to listen. And that was plenty. I may converse about this with anyone, but you have affirmed that my emotions are legitimate and not a cause for guilt. There is no necessity for thanks, I remarked gently, presenting him with a subtle smile. I value your confidence in addressing this issue. And please bear in mind that your emotions are never unreasonable. I am consistently there for Liam, irrespective of the situation. But that evening following our discussion, Liam seemed more collected, but a muted grief remained in his eyes. Despite not having uncovered all the answers he desired, he seemed to believe, for the first time in weeks, that he might not be completely alone in his confusion. In the next days, Liam progressively disclosed more of his identity, and with each conversation, the weight on his shoulders seemed to diminish marginally. The process was not rapid, yet it represented advancement. He seemed less distant and less trapped in his own ideas, although I saw that he still had much to understand about himself. Several weeks later, while sat on the porch enjoying the sunset, Liam turned to me with a soft smile and clearly communicated his gratitude, stating, "Thanks," his voice resonating with serene appreciation. "I am unsure how I would have coped without your support." I replied that appreciation was unnecessary. "I am relieved that you have successfully navigated your road, and I recognize that we will face any problems that arise together. There would be further instances of uncertainty and extra questions to resolve. Although I recognized that our bond was established on trust and respect, my understanding was enough resilient to withstand any test.